who's carrying you.
Shalom and welcome to this live Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ UK Zoom event where we have a very special guest today all the way from Florida. His name is Dr. Harold Rhode. He advised 5 US Secretaries of Defence on Islam and the Middle East. He's one of the world's leading experts on Iran and the Middle East and Islam, and he's done so much in order to shape US foreign policy towards the Middle East. He's a massive supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. So we've got a special treat for him tonight. But just to remind you that we are your embassy in Jerusalem. And this is such an important occasion tonight. But it's also Pesach, which is Passover. So Harold will give us a special Passover message as well. I'm going to hand over now to Mark Starbuck to pray for tonight's Zoom event for everyone who is participating and taking part. And we thank you that you can join us for this special evening.
Thank you, Simon, and welcome, Dr. Harold. Lovely to have you with us. So let's take a moment just to pray. Our Lord, we thank you that we can bring this webinar to you. We ask that every listener, every person that joins the Zoom will find something that informs them, that helps them, that just makes their understanding of Israel and its importance clearer. We ask for your blessing and your grace to be upon every aspect of this webinar. Thank you, Lord. Amen. Well, folk, for those of you who are joining us, you may be wondering, what is ICEJ? Now, ICEJ stands for the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. And at the heart of what ICEJ is are 3 central core missions. And that is, first of all, to be a comfort to Israel, to confront hatred, prejudice, anti-Semitism, wherever we find it, and to teach biblical truth to the church. So a little bit of news. At the moment, of course, on the international front, we are very, very focused on what is happening in the Ukraine. Many of our staff in Jerusalem are from the Ukraine, and they have been very moved and concerned with what is taking place there. And of course, we've been involved in Aliyah, and already hundreds of Jewish Ukrainians have been able to make Aliyah and have been brought back to the land of Israel. With a little bit of a longer view in mind, we are now gearing up for this year's live feast. Yay! Can you believe it? It's been 2 years where we haven't been able to meet, and of course, because of COVID. But now we are going to Jerusalem and we're going to the feast. And this year's theme, the Land of Promise, is going to be amazing. So we want you to come and join us at this year's feast. It's going to be such a joy to see everyone and to be able to see them in person. Locally, we of course have our Billinge conference this coming weekend. Israel, the clock is ticking. And our keynote speaker is David Parsons. We are also continuing with various projects and initiatives, and we're going to show you a video in a moment just to, as it were, give you an insight into how the work of ICEJ is progressing. So let's take a moment to watch a powerful video on how you, our UK supporters of ICEJ, are helping Israel with life-saving bomb shelters.
Hello friends, my name is Nicole Yoder and I'm the Vice President for Aid and Aliyah at the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. Today I'm speaking to you from the northern border of Israel, in a special town called Ma'alot Tarshiha. You can see behind me in the distance the hills that surround. This is a very special community because it's a community of two mixed Jewish and Arab communities. Ma'alot was a Jewish town and Tarshiha an Arab town, and they decided to come together in one single municipality. So it's a very mixed community of Bedouins and Druze and Muslims and Christians and immigrants from Russia and Ethiopia. Really a microcosm of Israeli society. And what I want to talk to you today is about the challenges that communities along the borders of Israel face. This community is just a few kilometers from the border, and we've had the privilege this morning to be up here delivering shelters and dedicating shelters from our Christian friends around the world that are going to provide protection for schools and kindergartens, children in vulnerable areas. These children have a lot to deal with, knowing that they live close to the border and any time an attack can happen where they need to run for shelter, and literally they have maybe 15 seconds to reach that shelter. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our friends in the UK. These communities have 15 seconds or less, almost no time at all to get to a shelter, so it's extremely important. The aid that you provided right next to where the school buses and vans unload and pick up the children every day. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our friends in the UK. God bless you. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our friends in the UK who have made it possible to donate this room full of computers. We have many people, dignitaries and leaders of the Druze community standing with me here today, and they've just been saying how important it is. This school did not have a computer room, and how important it is to teach about technology and to educate the youth. And so we're very excited to make a contribution to the school here and to the girls. We know that the children and the youth are the future of this country, and we're excited to support them and to support this community. And I wanted you, all of you, our friends in England, to see all of these wonderful people here. And you didn't get to hear all the speeches in Hebrew, but I'm telling you, they're sending you a very large thank you. And so God bless you, and thank you so much for your donation, which is going to help with the education of the young people here in the north of Israel.
אני רוצה גם להגיד מילה טובה במיוחד הרבה תורמים בעולם, אבל התורמים באנגליה במיוחד, אנחנו רוצים להגיד להם מילה תודה על כל מה שהם תורמים, ואנחנו יודעים שתורמים הרבה, לא רק כאן, אלא גם במקומות אחרים. אז שיבורכו.
So pray for those who see the logo of the Christian Embassy and recognize that there are Christian friends around the world who love them and support them, that this will be an encouragement and a blessing to them. And thank you so very much for your prayers. God bless you from Israel.
Isn't that great? Just to, be able to comfort, bless, support this work in the land of Israel. Now, as Simon mentioned in the introduction, we are incredibly privileged tonight to have a very special guest with us, Dr. Harold Rhode. And I'm going to just cherry pick a little bit of his biography. From 2010 to 2014, he was the Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Gatestone Institute in New York. He also served in Iraq as part of the Coalition Provisional Authority, and he was the liaison to the Iraqi opposition March through to June of 2003. He studied at the Firdousi University in Mashhad, Iran, during the early and mid stages of the Islamic Revolution, spring, summer of 1978. He's been the advisor on Islamic affairs in the Office of the Secretary of Defence, Net Assessment, 1994 January through to 2010. He joined the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy at the Pentagon in May 1982 as an advisor on the Islamic world, with special emphasis on Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. He wrote papers on how to understand, negotiate, and deal with Turkey, Iran, Central Asia, and the Arab countries. That was 1982 to 2010. Most notably, during the Gulf War, he served as the Turkish desk officer in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and at that time, he continued to write papers for the Office of the Secretary of Defense officials on Iran, Iraq, and other Middle Eastern issues. Papers that deal with strategies to accomplish US policy goals and how Middle Easterners perceive the actions of the United States of America. He served on the US Department of Defense's policy planning staff, prepared think pieces and strategy papers on Middle Eastern and Central Asian topics. That was 1991 through 94. He received his doctorate from Columbia University in Islamic history, specializing in the history of the Turks, Arabs, and Iranian peoples. He also studied in the universities in Iran, Egypt, and Israel. He studied in and traveled extensively throughout the Islamic world and has studied and done research in universities and libraries in Egypt, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Iran, Afghanistan, and Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. He taught Islamic history at the University of Delaware as an adjunct professor, 1979 to 81. And again, he received a PhD from Columbia University in Islamic history, specializing in the history of the Turks, Arabs, and Iranian peoples. So as you can see, he's studied in many universities. He had published many op-ed pieces in the late 70s and early 80s, published many op-ed pieces in media such as the Wall Street Journal and the Philadelphia Bulletin. He speaks the following languages: Arabic, French, Hebrew, Persian, Turkish, a little bit of Spanish, and some Italian when the coffee is good. So would you please welcome our special guest tonight? And Simon, I'll hand over back to you.
That was a brilliant introduction, Mark. Thank you so much. Harold, it's such a great honor that you're our special guest for this live Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ UK Zoom event tonight. Personally, I want to thank you because you've been such a mentor to me over the last couple of decades. I had the privilege of meeting you fresh out of university when I was passionate about wanting to advocate for Israel and the Jewish people, and it's with your understanding of the Middle East has helped me shape what I do today as a Christian broadcaster. So I owe you so much, and I just thank you for giving up your time tonight to speak with us.
I can only say the following after what Mark's introduction and what you said, Simon. I better shut up now and leave. Why? Because you've built me up in such an amazing way. I'm nowhere near as good as all of this. I'm a simple guy, and we all are simple people, and we all should remember that. So I hope I don't disappoint you in the end.
Not at all. I mean, we could spend a whole hour talking about your career working for the US Defense Department. But for our viewers watching tonight, Harold, can you tell us where it all began? What was life like for you growing up in a Jewish family in the United States?
Well, I must say that my family wasn't particularly religious. It wasn't observant. And if we had not had Israeli secular neighbors in this mostly African-American neighborhood, I don't know. They're the ones who awakened me, in me a sense of Jewish people, Jewish destiny, a love of the state of Israel, and a question of, I decided then, as already a little kid in the mid-50s, to dedicate my life to trying to find a way that the Jews, the state of Israel, and the Muslims could live in peace in the Middle East. And that's what I've spent most of my life trying to do. I'm now 75. I started, my interest started when I was 5. So that's a long time.
Absolutely. But what was it that you decided that you wanted to study Islam in particular, and also the Middle East? Obviously, that's awakened your interest in Israel. And of course, once you get interested in Israel, you have to understand the neighborhood that Israel lives in. And it's an extremely tough and aggressive neighborhood.
Well, I would say that something that both the Jews and Christians share in common in the Middle East is that Islam is a religion of power. Islam must rule, and the position of Christians and Jews and a few others that live there is that they can live as long as they acknowledge that they have no right to rule. They're in essence second-class citizens. Many Christians in the Middle East during these years, especially in the 19th and 20th century, went out of their way to be more Arab. They invented Arab nationalism. In the past, the word Arab only meant a nomad in the desert, but they invented this to try to find equality that had eluded them under Islamic rule. But what happened was that the Christians who did this assigned Arab identities to Muslims. And the Muslims, when they understood what Arab nationalism was all about, saying, listen, you know, the only way you're going to be a good Arab is if you're a Muslim. And Christians were then outsiders again. And I can only tell you that, especially within Israel today, there is a group of people who grew up, Christians who grew up speaking Arabic, who have decided enough is enough. We are not only loyal citizens of Israel, but in fact, we come from the same origins as the Jews. And they are throwing their lot in with the Jews. They are serving in more and more high positions in the Israeli military. And their answer is, some of us in our past tried to be accepted by the Muslims. They did not accept us. And the Jews are welcoming us with open arms. So, the point is, in Western society, we have this sense that every human being is equal. In the Middle East, since Islam must rule, then in essence, no matter what you do, the people who control our destinies, that is the non-Muslims, are the Muslims, and they make the decisions. And then the more that I learned, the more that I became more and more concerned. For example, if someone converts to Islam, which you can do in about a minute, once you convert, when you enter into Islam, and I'm translating from Arabic in my mind, when you enter into Islam, you cannot leave it. If you decide I made a mistake and want to go back, by Islamic law, that is punishable by death. Now, it's not only individuals who become Muslims who have once they've entered Islam, there's no exit. The other thing is territory. Once a land is opened up for Islam, that same word open, up to Islam, and enters Islam, almost always through a Muslim conquest, then it must remain Muslim forever. Let's talk for a moment about, let's say, Spain and Portugal. The Iberian Peninsula, those two countries today, were conquered by the Muslims in 712, and they lost it in 1492. And since then, Islam has not ruled in those areas. But according to Islamic law, and if you read the many discussions about, they call it Andalusia, this is Muslim territory, and they talk about how it will return to the bosom of Islam. Now, they lost it 530 years ago. They were never promised it. by God or anything else. But again, the area was conquered by Islam. Now, why am I bringing this up vis-a-vis Israel today? Is what is today the land of Israel was conquered by the Muslims in 637. So therefore, it belongs to Islam forever. And Tel Aviv, which is part of pre-Six-Day War Israel, is as much Muslim as any of the Muslim towns anywhere within Israel or in Judea and Samaria, or also other people, some people call it the West Bank. And so all this, from their point of view, belongs to Islam. Now, how do you compromise on this? And the answer is you can't. There is no way of compromising on this. That's sort of like, they cancel each other out, X or minus X. It's either you're this or you're not. You cannot compromise on that. And so all these people with maybe the best of intentions who want to try to make peace between Israel, between the Jewish state and the surrounding countries, it's impossible. I hate what I'm saying, but that's what the 67 years of me studying Islam has really taught me. Yeah. The only way, I'm going to just include this one thought. The only way that this that Israel or any Christian entity in the Middle East can survive is the other side must understand that if they do, they will suffer, that we the non-Muslims will come down on them like a ton of bricks. We must show them who is boss, and then they know how to wait in the Middle East. They'll wait for hundreds of years until they recapture us. That's the framework in which Israel lives, and that's what the Christians in other areas throughout the Middle East are living in. It's very hard.
And Harold, can I just ask how that fits in with the newly signed Abraham Accords, considering that Israel has opened up relations with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Sudan, with Morocco. There's even discussion about bringing the largest Muslim country on board, Indonesia. How does that work, the Abraham Accords work with this concept?
Well, there are two or three answers here. Number one, Israel has shown that, as the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, said, when America is, shall we say, shirking its responsibilities as the greatest power in the world and is abandoning the people, let's say, in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, the Arab states there, to Iran, they need to find somebody, some power that will replace what Ron Dermer called America, which was the 800-pound gorilla, which stood up to defend them, with the 250-pound gorilla, which is Israel. So when Israel shows strength, especially against Iran, these countries are, they're looking to Israel basically to help them. The people in the Gulf say straightforwardly, it's not out of love of Israel. And the Jews, our problem as Jews is we want everybody to love us, when we should be worrying about let them respect us. And the Gulfies, the people in the Gulf will say straightforward, we're not interested in loving or hating them. We have a lot of interest in common, and as long as we have those interests in common, we share common ground, we are going to work together. And the Abraham Accords people in the Gulf know that they share an existential threat with Israel, and that is against Iran, because Iran wants to eliminate them. Iran is a Shiite Muslim country. Most of the other countries in the world, most are Sunni. And again, since you can never solve anything in the Middle East, the Shiites and the Sunnis have been, the fight has been around since their prophet Muhammad died, which is 631 and ADCE. And they're still trying to decide who's going to run the world. And the Arabs have a phrase me against my brother, me and my cousin and me and my brother and my cousin, excuse me, me and against my brother, me and my brother against my cousin, me and my brother and cousin against the world. But this is a common phrase, but there's another one. If my brother is trying to kill me, I'll ally with my cousin and I will ally with the world against my brother. Or if someone's trying to kill my brother and me, I'll make all sorts of temporary alliances as necessary. That's what the Abraham Accords are all about. And as long as Israel is strong and it has the economic and technological abilities that the people in the Gulf so want, and Morocco and Sudan and a few other things, they're happy to ally with Israel. But we shouldn't understand this as the common interests, for example, like the UK and the United States have in common. We have United States and the UK common traditions, democracy, freedom, and human rights, and it's British common law. It goes back to what is the phrase? The Magna Carta. This is who we have common things way back. The Israelis and the Gulfies do not. They don't, and they're very happy to work together because they share common interests now. God willing, these interests will continue.
Absolutely. So in a scenario where Israel is weak, and Israel is not able to offer that protection to the Gulf states, does that relationship change then between the Gulf states and possibly Saudi Arabia and the Sunni states and Israel? So is it just really based on this existential threat posed by Iran rather than a kind of understanding of Israel's position in the Middle East?
What scares me is Israel's strong. There's no question about it. And a lot of military analysts, including some that you've had on your program, Simon, when asked, because they understand military and I don't understand military issues, that if Israel can take out the Iranian nuclear program if it chooses to do so. But when Israel shows weakness, like right now, the way it did vis-a-vis the riots in Judea and Samaria, the Muslim riots, and the killings throughout Israel, that about 14 people in the last few weeks were killed. When Israel shows weakness, the Gulfies themselves ask themselves, wait a minute, can we rely on Israel to be on the same team as us? And the truth is that as a result of Israel, which in the Jerusalem riots right now on the Temple Mount, the Arabs provoked this, the Muslims provoked this, and the Israelis at first did nothing. Then they went in and cleaned it up. The way they did it, and afterwards, a lot of the Arabs, a lot of the people in the Gulf said, Israel is showing unsuredness, or that it's not prepared maybe to use its might as necessary. And so the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, has said that it won't take part in a military flyover, which was going to on Israeli Independence Day, which is, I think, this year in early May. And it, I forget one other thing that it said it would suspend, but Israel, when it shows weakness, the other side's always looking, can they rely on Israel? And if the answer is no, then they look for other alternatives. The Arabs are weak, and they need a strong force who will stand behind them, who will help them.
Which leads to the big question that could Russia or China fill that gap? Because clearly we've seen over the last decade a full US retreat from the Middle East, which has allowed the Russians to come in and the Chinese to come in. So if Israel is not the strongest player in the region, if it doesn't stand up to the Iranian threat in the region, is there a great danger then that the Sunni states will turn to the likes of China or Russia? And how will that change the Middle East?
Well, they sure could. Just to give you an example, the Americans have done their utmost under the present administration in Washington to abandon the Saudis. And just none of these countries are prepared to commit suicide to make the Biden administration happy. And if America is prepared to abandon them, they're going to look elsewhere. And if Israel was weak, then it is an opening. I would say even more so for China than for Russia, because we don't know. So far, Russia in Ukraine has performed very poorly. We just, but the question is there an opening for China? I don't know the answer, but if America shows weakness and Israel shows weakness, these other Middle Eastern, there's tiny and weak countries, they need to look for cover. And China could be a possibility. I hope this doesn't come to that, but that requires resolve today within Israel, which we don't see the way we used to, unfortunately. And it requires America to resume its natural role as the head of the forces of freedom in the world.
And Harold, what is your assessment for someone who actually worked on formulating US foreign policy, also defense policy to the Middle East? What are your thoughts on the Biden administration, and particularly the possibility of the renewed Iran deal over Iran's nuclear weapons, as the Obama administration did in 2015? Is there a great danger that that the United States is surrendering Israel as a key ally in the Middle East and allowing the Iranian regime to acquire nuclear weapons?
I think your question is the answer. Yes, there is a great danger. But one thing, at least within Israeli society, which is extremely important, is that they know what they're up against, and that Israel loves America. It loves the American people. The biggest supporters in the United States of Israel aren't the Jews. It's Christians like yourselves. It's evangelicals. It's people who believe in what is in the book of Exodus, Exodus, in Genesis, towards the very beginning. I will love those who support my people, and I will curse those who don't. And what concerns me here is that if America abandons Israel, that is the American government, then the Israelis aren't going to commit suicide, just like the Saudis aren't going to commit suicide to make America feel good, or the Biden administration. And what is to me so unbelievably shameful is that it seems, there was just this summit in the Negev desert, which started out as Israel and 4 Arab countries. Now, they were, one of the things they did not want to discuss or have even bring up is the whole Palestinian issue, because the truth is most of these countries detest the Palestinians, who have done nothing more than harm their countries. But then Secretary of State Blinken pushed himself into this meeting and said, and tried to make it the issue, the Palestinians. Unfortunately, Israel was silent on this, which indicated to the 4 Arab countries that were there that, wait a minute, Israel's showing weakness here. But we have the Biden administration. I'm sorry, I'm talking really at length here to your answer to your question. I think the Biden administration is reaping nothing but horrible things in the Middle East. Absolutely nothing of any good that I can see that they're trying to do in the Middle East. Making Iran the center of American foreign policy, whose government and its military have done their damnedest over and over again to say how much they hate America. America can't do a damn thing. It's in Persian behind many times when the leader there, the supreme leader, the Führer of Iran, Khamenei, he speaks behind these, behind him is this sign that says in Persian, America can't do a damn thing. And America wants to bow down to these people. And the Islamic Republican Revolutionary Guard Corps, which the Iranian government wants America to take off its terrorist list. This is an organization. This is the military that really that backs the regime. That's the strength of the regime in Iran. These are people who killed Americans galore in Iraq and in other places in the world. And we want to bow down to them. Something is wrong with this picture.
Absolutely. And can you share from your own experience, Harold, what it was like studying in Iran during the time of the Shah in 1978, just as the Islamic Revolution started to kick off? I mean, it must have been a scary time to be an American in Iran at the time.
Well, Iranians look to go with strength. Who is strong? And they didn't even know who Khomeini is, the people that I work with. Now, Mashhad, where I studied, is a religious city. From a Shiite point of view, their eighth, what is called Imam, the descendant of their prophet Muhammad, is buried there. Mashhad means a place of martyrdom. And these people they had no idea who Khomeini, who was a religious leader, they had no idea who Khomeini was. Because I was asking around and everybody was telling me that, oh my, I had no idea. That's what I told them, but I once said that I had heard his name. And when my fellow students who were certainly not involved in politics before, when they thought the Shah was strong, but when they saw that the Shah wasn't putting down riots, they saw he was weak. And here was Khomeini saying, when I come back to Iran, this, that, and the other thing is going to happen. And he kept saying, after the Shah leaves, after the Shah is gone. That's the exact phrase that they use. And the Iranian students that I was studying with were saying, here's power. And they put their finger up in the air and they can tell where power is, and they flock to it. And they had no idea. These same students came to me and asked me, who was Khomeini? Because they remembered that I had mentioned his name. They look for power. The Middle East they go to where strength is. When we say, come, let us reason together, a beautiful Christian concept, that means you're weak. And from their point of view, that's when they strike. You want to negotiate before you've shown who's boss? That shows, oh, you don't have the strength or the will to win. And so I'm going to kick you. I'm going to strike you. I'm going to hit you. And that's why people supported Khomeini. They didn't support Khomeini. They saw that power was shifting from the Shah to this person they didn't even know. So that's why they're out in the streets. They wanted to make sure that everybody understood they were pro-Khomeini. Imagine you're going to say, I'm going to vote for somebody I haven't a clue. I never heard his name before a few minutes ago. That's life in Iran. It was a very scary experience. Eventually, I was with a friend at the time. We escaped to Afghanistan. Well, we're alive to talk about it, but we saw people, shot. We weren't sure who was doing the shooting. What we did see is the Iranian government's guns weren't raised, and that was the Shah's people. So someone else was instigating here. And I think it was the forces of Islam in the religious establishment who, remember, Islam for them is power. There's no such thing as separation of religion and state. And we have separation of religion and state in the West. They do not.
And share with us the impact that the Trump administration had on assassinating the Iranian general Qasemi, is it Qasemi? And the impact that had on the Iranian regime.
Well, Qasem Soleimani was probably the most important military man in the Iranian military. He was very close with the rulers and all that. And he was like the son to to Khomeini, the leader, the guy, the chief terrorist of Iran. When Trump took him out, their response was, oh my God, that is the people of Iran? Thank God, because so many Iranians say, how long are you America going to let this regime stay in power? All they're doing is oppressing us as a people. And there was a chance there that once Qasem Soleimani was gone to go even further. America never needed to go into Iran, but America could work with those forces who wanted to take out the regime. It could have encouraged the activity of killing the nuclear sciences, things that have been attributed to Israel. Israel never took credit for this, and it shouldn't. But it's just so sad that that in came the new administration and would not capitalize on the great things that President Trump was doing to push the Iranians into the corner, to bring their economy down, to provide opportunities for the Iranian people to revolt and free their country. And the moment that the Biden administration came in, it was like the Obama administration. The Iranian government said, thank God. It's like, because they got a respite, and the Iranian people are the ones that suffer. They would love this regime gone, but they need a powerful force that that they know will support them if they do it.
And Harold, I have to bring something else into the mix here, and this is your involvement during the war in Iraq, and particularly in the aftermath of it, because there's some incredible video footage of you and pictures of you helping to rescue Torah scrolls from ancient Jewish synagogues in Iraq. Can you share with us that mission you undertook to protect these very valuable and sacred Torah scrolls?
Oh, it's a fascinating story. A lot of times, since I'm not a military man, was asking myself, why am I here in Iraq? I'm away from my wife. Why am I here? And, God has his way of sending us on missions, and sometimes we don't even know what they are until we're there. And one day I get a call from the head of the Iraqi opposition when we had just gone into Baghdad, named Ahmad Chalabi, who was a wonderful, remarkable human being. And he believed that everybody should get along, a Shiite Muslim. And he said, Harold, the head of the Jewish section of the, let's say, I would say FBI, CIA in the United States, their MI6 is foreign intelligence in Britain, and there must be a domestic intelligence of some sort. It's a combination of all that. In the guy who was in charge under Saddam Hussein, the tyrant who ruled the place before we liberated it, he said the guy who was in charge of the Jewish section and the Israel section has just come and spilled the beans of what they had in the center of the intelligence headquarters. And it was all underwater because American had bombed this building. And all what happened when it bombed, the bomb didn't go off, so the building didn't explode. It went out, but it destroyed the water system, and all the water dripped down into the basement. And in the basement is where the Jewish archives was. There, you had Torah scrolls, you had all sorts of Jewish religious books, you had communal records and all that. And in the beginning, when this happened, Chalabi said, what should I do with this? What do you want to do with this? Well, I had, at that moment, God sends us things where we have to make the right decision instantaneously. So I said, we got to work to try to save this. And in the beginning, the American government was not helpful on this. But then, for various wonderful reasons, the American government took over the whole project and freeze-dried them, took the archives to the National American Archives restoration, I think, where they repair things, which was in Texas, and then brought the thing to the whole archives to Washington, and they worked patiently and beautifully to restore these things. They did a beautiful, beautiful job. To the best of my knowledge, the archives, because of American internal State Department view of the world, if you take over another country, you cannot take out its patrimony. Now, most of this material belonged to Jewish families. It didn't belong to the Iraqi state, but the State Department negotiated with itself when it had Iraqi sovereignty in the very beginning when we found this, and said we would take the stuff out, we would repair it, and then return it to its natural where it belongs, which is in Iraq. The problem is there are no Jews in Iraq today. And this is the personal records and synagogue properties. These Torahs belong to the Jews of Iraq. About 85 to 90% today are in Israel. There is a small number in the UK, especially in the London area. And there are some in the United States, but the Americans want to give this to the Iraqi government. There's nobody who can use it. No, it's not theirs. Saddam Hussein stole it. So shall we say, the whole project is in limbo. I did what I could, and I firmly believe that God put me there because I was the only one who knew Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic, who could read these things and realize what they were. You know, God has his way of working. It's far beyond us to understand the way he does things.
Incredible. And talking about God, we know now is Passover, but in Hebrew, Pesach, when we remember God's deliverance of the Jewish people at the hands of the pharaohs. Can you share with us a message that applies today that we can learn from the story of Passover and God's deliverance through Moses of the ancient Israelites that were oppressed by the Egyptians?
It's amazing. Simon, when God made his covenant with Abraham, way back beforehand, he said, you will eventually, your people, your descendants will be like the stars in the number of the stars in the sky. He also promised that the Jewish people will survive whatever we've been through. And what we went through was supposed to be 400 years or so, but it ended up being only 200 or so because we had reached apparently such a low point that God said he had to get us out of Egypt. And he took us out of Egypt. He brought us from slavery into freedom. Freedom means you have the personal choice, the ability to make decisions for yourself, and you are responsible for your decisions, which is the basis of Judaism. There's no such thing as everything is fate. If there's fate, you have no personal responsibility for your decisions. It's all in God's hands. Well, don't blame me. You did it, God. That's not Judaism. And since we were freed from Egypt, it's about 3,300 years ago. Since then, many people have tried to destroy us, but somehow, unlike all other peoples who were great and disappeared, we were small and somehow we have continued to survive. And that is, in the end, we can do what we want, but in the end, we got to rely on God. God told us to leave Egypt. And many of us stayed behind. God knows what happened to them because we don't know. But that is the beginning of our freedom. That is the beginning of we went from being a bunch of tribes to a nation. And since then, whatever has happened, look, there's a joke in that we say that they tried to kill us, some of us survived, now let's eat. Meaning, somehow we survived. Look at what the Holocaust is, the culmination of all the awful things that happened to us. That, where 1/3 of our people was killed, destroyed by 1945, 1948, 3 years later, the reestablishment of our ancient Jewish state. And look at what the Jewish people have done in Israel since 1948 to today. And look at the technology, the advancement from basically a desert, they've made it bloom. The technologies, whenever there's a problem, like there are hurricanes, there are buildings that collapse, the Israelis, the Jews are sending people out and quietly, they don't make a big deal of it, to help everybody in the world. The technologies that Israel produces, it's like it's for the good of humanity. Unfortunately, so much of Silicon Valley is feel-good stuff, social media, which destroys the soul. And people have 500 Facebook friends, have no friends, no real friends. Somehow God has a role for us. We are the ones, we were chosen to receive his word and to spread his word to the world. And God willing, we will continue to do this. And as bad as things come, and I know this is going to say, but I'm going to say sounds very strange now. I believe that there will come a time that Jerusalem will be both the religious capital of the world and probably, and I don't know when, I wouldn't be surprised if it also became the political capital of the world. It's all in God's hands.
Very profound. This is your opportunity, really, if you have any questions for Harold in the last 10 minutes of the Zoom event, to ask him any question that you'd like. He's got such a massive range of knowledge. He can speak in virtually any language you want as well. Harold will be able to understand it. Harold, we talked today so much about the Middle East, and also you gave us a wonderful spiritual message of where we are today. Now, we know that in early May, Israel celebrates a 74th anniversary as a nation reborn in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. What role do you see evangelical Christians playing in this time? Because we need to stand with Israel, we need to stand with the Jewish people, and to fight your cause, because your cause is a righteous cause.
Our cause is God's cause, and when you join us, you are joining. God says so. You know, the Bible is the deed that God gave the Jewish people, the deed for the land of Israel. When you support Israel, and there are many ways that you're doing it, and there's really awesome that you're helping us. God rewards you. God says that's what he's going to do. Now, the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem is literally down the street from a place that I'm a fellow at. It's called the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I've been in the Christian Embassy many, many times. We're on the same mission, and God will only reward all these evangelicals. As I said, in America, thank God for the evangelicals, because unfortunately, so many of the Jews in America don't seem to care so much about Israel anymore. The religious Jews do, but the non-religious Jews, it's becoming, we need you. God needs you. I can't talk in God's name, but God says what he wants. We need you on this mission. It is a joint mission. Now, besides all the political things and like, for example, we saw this wonderful video from Untitled Chapter in the beginning of how Christians are helping build shelters. There is a beautiful project in the northern Samaria, Northwest Bank, where Christians have come, mostly evangelical American, all evangelicals, mostly Americans, to take areas which were completely, shall we say, rocks and desertified, and they are building these marvelous grape vineyards up there, and to go up there and to see this, and if they're, especially if young people, but also older people, if evangelicals want to go for the summer, for example, and help work, build, create and this lush, beautiful green area, and reforest this whole area, help Israel. And you're doing such a beautiful, beautiful job. Just continue what you're doing. Thank God for you.
Harold Rhode, it's been an absolute honor that you could join us tonight from Florida. Also considering as well that it's Pesach as well, so even more grateful to you. I'm just going to hand it over to Mark Starbuck. We've still got time for a couple of questions if any of you watching would like to give a question to Harold, but I'm sure that Mark has something to say on reflection on what Harold has told us tonight.
Well, Harold, first of all, thank you so much for your contribution to tonight's program. It's been wonderful. We could sit and listen to you all night.
Oi.
And of course, from our perspective, the International Christian Embassy, we absolutely agree with you that one day Jerusalem will be the capital of the world. And indeed, there's a lovely book entitled When a Jew Rules the World.
Oi.
And of course, that is something which we share together and we believe in together. So thank you so much for your years of service, your very honest assessment of what is going on in the Middle East. I remember years ago listening to a wonderful speaker, a man called Lance Lambert, and he said that no peace agreement is worth the piece of paper it's written on, because of the very thing that you shared tonight, and that is that Islam can never accept the existence of a reborn state of Israel. And so it is a sobering thought. But of course, we believe that this is all part of God's plan and purpose for the nations, and in particular for the nation of Israel. And so to those of you who have joined us, I'm not sure, Simon, if any other questions have come in. If you want to interject with something, please feel free to do that. Otherwise, I'll put my landing lights on and flaps down and head for a landing.
I don't think we've got any more questions, but Harold, what does the future hold for you now? Because you don't really believe in retirement. I know that you're in Florida right now, and it is the kind of retirement state in the United States, but I can't see you retiring anytime soon. So do you have plans to make Aliyah, to live in Israel, to be in Jerusalem in the Eternal City?
We're here in Florida to take care of my mother-in-law, who's 98.
Wow.
And what will happen afterwards? We have an apartment in Jerusalem, and maybe we'll go back and forth between our apartment here and our apartment there. There is something special about being in Israel, which is the air, the land. There are no words. And Mark, because you're there, you understand very, very well what I'm talking about. And I could see us going back and forth. As long as my mother-in-law is here, it's our responsibility, and we will do what we have to take care of her, and then we'll see what happens.
Okay, we got one question in, and this is from my good Jewish friend. Her name is Sharon Claff from the Campaign of Truth. She said, I just want to say thank you for a fantastic talk. My question is, how can people speak out candidly in this climate of woke censorship? And Sharon herself has been attacked and abused for being Jewish by exposing a Jeremy Corbyn rally.
Well,
about a couple of years ago.
It really is simple. You must believe in yourself. You must believe in your mission, and you open your mouth. And there are organizations which teach people how to open their mouth and be vocal. You must know your facts, and never let them hold you down. I would just say one thing, that during, I voted for Trump in the last election, and I will vote for almost anybody besides the Democrats today. And I was born a Democrat. I grew up as a Democrat. Now, what you do is stand up. Now, when I was supporting Trump in 2016, a lot of people would say really crazy things, but over and over again, people would come up to me and say, thank God for what you're saying, because I don't have the strength to say what you're saying. I tell people I'm going to vote for the Democrat, but I'm voting for Trump. Please be strong. Believe in yourselves. Open your mouths. There are so many people who think just like you do. Sharon is your name? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
It's Sharon, yeah.
Sharon, just step forward, do what you're doing, and don't worry.
Yeah.
I think that's a good night to end tonight's Zoom event on. Harold, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And I think you've enlightened us all about Israel, the Middle East, Islam, and also being bold with the truth. And as Christians, we need to show that boldness in standing with Israel and the Jewish people, because this is the righteous thing to do. And it's one of the greatest honors of my life to have friends like you, Harold, and friends like Sharon and others who are Jewish, and also my Israeli friends, because there is a special relationship when you make friends with Jewish people. And I've learned so much.
Simon. We feel the same.
Tidaba. So Harold and everyone else, Hag Sameach, as it's Passover. And thank you so much for joining us on this live Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ Zoom event. And it's Shalom and Laila Tov from us. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Catch the wind, catch the wind. He's carrying